In the depths of time, where the sands of history slip through the hourglass, there exists a figure whose name echoes through the corridors of every age: Khidr. His story is one that transcends time itself, a life lived not in linear progression, but in cycles of knowledge, wisdom, and the mastery of an ancient, hidden art known only as Ilm Laduni. To those who seek answers to the deepest mysteries of the universe, Khidr is a guide, a teacher, and in some cases, a protector. But his journey was never one of simple discovery. It was a path marked by solitude, sacrifice, and a connection to forces beyond human comprehension. Khidr's journey began long before the world as we know it came into being. He was not born in the way humans are, nor was his existence tied to the constraints of time. He came into being during a time before time itself could be measured, a period when the earth was yet untouched by civilization. The world was an untouched canvas, and Khidr, a being of pure spiritual essence, was destined to play a role in its creation and evolution. His very presence on earth was a gift, one that connected him to the divine in ways that no other mortal would ever comprehend. He was granted the knowledge of Ilm Laduni, a form of divine knowledge bestowed by the Creator. This knowledge was not taught through the traditional means of learning or study. It was not confined to written books or teachings passed down through generations. Ilm Laduni was a unique and extraordinary gift, a knowledge that transcended the physical and mental realms. It was a spiritual enlightenment, a connection to the unseen forces that govern the universe. With this gift, Khidr could see beyond the surface of things, understanding the truths hidden deep within the fabric of reality. He could perceive the interconnectedness of all beings, all events, and all moments in time. This ability would serve him well in his long journey through the ages, as he would be called upon to guide, to intervene, and at times, to protect humanity from the forces of darkness. That despite his divine gifts, Khidr was not a being of ease. His existence was far from perfect. He was burdened with the weight of his knowledge, for the wisdom he held was not meant for the faint of heart. It came with a price. Khidr could see the suffering and pain of the world, the choices humanity made, and the consequences of those choices. He could feel the weight of every wrong committed, every injustice, and every tear shed by those who suffered. This burden, though it was his to carry, was not one he could escape. His connection to the world was absolute, and for every step he took, every piece of knowledge he gained, the world itself seemed to shift in response. As Khidr walked through the ages, he encountered many who sought his wisdom. Some came with pure hearts, desiring to learn and grow. Others came with selfish motives, seeking power and control over the forces he wielded. But Khidr was not easily swayed. He knew that knowledge, when used improperly, could destroy as easily as it could build. And so, he guided those who were worthy, steering them toward paths of righteousness and peace. But he also stood firm against those who sought to misuse his teachings for their own gain, using his powers to shield the world from the destructive forces of greed, hatred, and tyranny. Through his travels, Khidr encountered many figures who would come to shape the course of history. Some of these figures were mortal, while others were beings of incredible power and significance. He met great kings and warriors, wise sages, and even some who would be remembered as the greatest of humanity's enemies. But no matter their station or power, Khidr remained unchanged. His focus was not on the world of men, but on the larger purpose for which he had been created. His mission was not to save individuals, but to preserve the balance of the universe itself. In one of his earliest encounters with mankind, Khidr met a great king who sought his wisdom. This king, whose kingdom stretched across vast lands, was known for his wisdom and his desire for peace. He was troubled by the constant wars and conflicts that ravaged his kingdom, and he sought Khidr's guidance on how to bring lasting peace to his people. Khidr, who had witnessed the rise and fall of countless kingdoms, understood the true nature of power and conflict. He knew that true peace could not be achieved through force or coercion. It had to come from within the hearts of the people themselves. And so Khidr offered the king a piece of advice that would forever change the course of history. He told the king, "Peace cannot be imposed from above. It must be nurtured from within. The hearts of men must be cleansed of hatred, greed, and fear, for only then can true peace blossom." The king, moved by Khidr's words, sought to change the very nature of his kingdom. He began to focus not on expanding his borders or increasing his power, but on fostering love, compassion, and understanding among his people. The effects of his leadership were profound, and his kingdom became a beacon of peace in a world that was often torn apart by war. But Khidr's journey was far from over. His wisdom, though powerful, was not always welcomed by those who were driven by their own desires. As he continued his travels, he encountered those who sought to exploit his knowledge for personal gain. These individuals, blinded by their own ambition, did not understand the true cost of the gifts Khidr offered. And so they would test him, seeking to challenge his wisdom and his resolve. Through each trial, Khidr remained steadfast. He knew that the true measure of a person was not in their wealth, power, or status, but in their ability to choose the right path, even when the world seemed to offer no clear answers. His journey would continue through the ages, his presence remaining a constant in a world that was ever-changing. And though he would meet many who would try to sway him from his purpose, Khidr knew that his role in the grand tapestry of time was far from over. As centuries passed, Khidr's path through time became ever more complicated. The world was changing, evolving at a rapid pace, and with it, the challenges he faced grew ever more difficult. The once pristine world that Khidr had known in the beginning was now filled with noise, conflict, and confusion. Empires rose and fell, kings and rulers came and went, and yet Khidr remained a constant, a steady figure in the ever-shifting landscape. He had witnessed the dawn of civilizations and watched as their empires crumbled into dust. And yet, through it all, he never wavered from his mission. Khidr's mastery over Ilm Laduni allowed him to exist outside of time in a way that no mortal ever could. He could walk through the centuries with the ease of a man strolling through a single day. Yet, even with such power, Khidr remained deeply connected to the world he sought to protect. He understood that every action, no matter how small, ripples through time, affecting countless lives in ways that could not always be predicted. This deep understanding of time's fluidity gave Khidr a sense of urgency. He knew that every moment was precious, and that the knowledge he possessed must be used wisely to guide humanity toward a better future. One of the most crucial moments of Khidr's journey came during a period of great upheaval. A new power had risen on the horizon, an empire unlike any the world had seen before. It was an empire built on fear and cruelty, one that sought to dominate all other civilizations. Its rulers believed that strength and fear were the keys to control, and they sought to impose their will on the entire world. The emperor, a man of great ambition, had heard whispers of Khidr and his powers. Desiring the wisdom and strength that Khidr could offer, he sent his most trusted advisors to find him. They promised the timeless traveler unimaginable wealth, status, and the power to shape the world according to his will if he agreed to serve the emperor. Khidr was no stranger to such offers. Over the centuries, many rulers and kings had attempted to sway him, offering everything from kingdoms to unimaginable riches in exchange for his allegiance. But Khidr had never been moved by power or wealth. He had seen the damage that such things could do, and he knew that true strength came not from domination, but from understanding and compassion. And so, he refused the emperor's offer, just as he had refused so many before him. However, this time, the consequences were far more severe. The emperor, angered by Khidr's refusal, decided to force the traveler's hand. He ordered his armies to find and capture Khidr, intending to bring him to the emperor's court in chains. The emperor believed that once Khidr was under his control, he could use the ancient traveler's knowledge to conquer the world. What the emperor did not realize was that Khidr's connection to Ilm Laduni was far beyond his comprehension. He could not be captured, nor could he be controlled. Khidr was a force of nature, a being who existed in a realm beyond the physical. The armies sent to capture Khidr found themselves unable to even approach him. Each time they tried, they were repelled by forces they could not understand. Khidr's presence was so powerful, so intertwined with the fabric of the universe itself, that no mortal force could touch him. It was as if the very laws of nature bent in his favor, shielding him from harm. The emperor's forces were helpless against the traveler, and their pursuit came to a humiliating end. But Khidr knew that the emperor's desire for power would not be easily quenched. He had faced such greed before, and he understood the lengths to which men would go to satisfy their hunger for control. So rather than retreating into the shadows, Khidr chose to confront the emperor in a way that would forever change the course of history. He made his way to the emperor's palace, a grand structure that towered over the landscape. The emperor awaited him, confident that he had finally cornered the elusive traveler. When Khidr arrived, the emperor stood at the head of his court, flanked by his most trusted generals and advisors. They all watched with anticipation, certain that Khidr would bow before the emperor's power. But Khidr, as always, remained unmoved. He stepped forward, his presence filling the room with an energy that was both awe-inspiring and terrifying. The emperor, who had believed himself to be the master of all, now found himself facing a being whose power far exceeded his own. Khidr spoke not of war, but of peace, not of destruction, but of creation. "The strength you seek," Khidr said, his voice calm yet commanding, "is not found in fear or force. True power lies in understanding, in harmony with the world around. It lies in wisdom, not control." The emperor, having lived his life in pursuit of domination, did not understand. He mocked Khidr's words, thinking them to be the ramblings of an old fool. But Khidr, undeterred, simply smiled. He knew that the emperor's heart was close to the truth, and no amount of words could open it. But actions, Khidr understood, spoke louder than words, and so he took a single step forward, his presence now filling the entire room. The very walls of the palace seemed to shake with the force of his being. The emperor's soldiers, who had been standing in formation, faltered, their courage evaporating in an instant. They could not withstand the weight of Khidr's aura, and one by one, they dropped to their knees. Overcome by the traveler's power, the emperor too began to feel the weight of Khidr's presence. His heart raced, his breath quickened, and for the first time in his life, he felt the cold grip of fear. Khidr's eyes, ageless and knowing, met his, and in that moment, the emperor understood. He understood that he was but a fleeting speck in the vastness of time, a pawn in a game far beyond his comprehension. Khidr spoke once more, his voice soft but filled with an undeniable authority. "You will not conquer the world with fear. You will not rule through cruelty. But if you seek true strength, seek wisdom. Seek knowledge. Only then can you hope to build a legacy that will endure beyond your time." With those words, Khidr turned and walked away, leaving the emperor and his court in stunned silence. The emperor's empire, once full of pride and arrogance, would never be the same again. Khidr's encounter with the emperor marked a turning point, not just for the ruler, but for the world itself. The echoes of that moment would reverberate through time, reminding all who heard it that true power was not in domination, but in understanding. Khidr's journey continued, and as the world advanced, so too did the challenges he faced. Empires rose and fell, and the spread of knowledge changed the course of history. However, there was a shift occurring that Khidr had been watching from the shadows. It was not just the corruption of power that troubled him. It was the growing disconnect between humanity and its true purpose. In his travels, Khidr had come to understand that the core of humanity's problems was not its ability to conquer or to build, but its inability to remember its essence, its true connection to the universe. One particular moment in time stood out to Khidr. It was during an era where human innovation was at its peak, and people were driven by ambition and greed. A great city, one that housed the greatest minds of the time, had been established at the crossroads of trade and intellect. People traveled from all corners of the world to seek knowledge, to learn, and to rise above their peers. Yet beneath the city's glittering surface, a deep rot was festering. The city's rulers, despite their outward appearance of wisdom, were lost in their own pursuit of glory. They believed that the advancement of technology, the conquering of distant lands, and the accumulation of wealth were the true measures of success. They had forgotten the most fundamental principle, that knowledge was not an end in itself, but a tool to serve the greater good. This disregard for balance and ethics created an environment where the powerful grew more arrogant and the weak suffered in silence. It was here that Khidr saw the next stage of his mission unfold. He knew that the path humanity was on would lead to its downfall unless something changed. The rulers of the city had become obsessed with their pursuit of power, believing that their innovations in science and technology could elevate them above the laws of nature. In their arrogance, they had begun experimenting with forces they did not understand, forces that had the potential to unravel the very fabric of the world. This reckless use of knowledge would have catastrophic consequences, and Khidr knew he had to intervene. He approached the city in silence, cloaked in the shadows of history. He did not announce his arrival with fanfare or grand declarations. Instead, he moved through the streets unnoticed, blending in with the common people. It was during this time that he encountered a young scholar named Idris. The young man was known throughout the city for his intellect and his thirst for knowledge. Unlike many of the city's elites, Idris had a deep respect for the ancient teachings that Khidr had once shared with humanity. He had studied the works of sages and mystics from ages past, and he had come to understand the importance of balance in all things. Idris was unlike the others, who sought knowledge for personal gain. He sought it for a higher purpose, to uncover the truth of the world, to understand the mysteries of life, and to guide humanity toward a better future. When Khidr saw this, he knew that this young man could be the key to saving the world from the impending disaster. Khidr chose to reveal himself to Idris, trusting that he would understand the weight of his presence and the knowledge he carried. Their first meeting was quiet, set in the privacy of a small library that Idris had built for himself. It was here that Khidr, in his timeless form, appeared before Idris. The young scholar, though startled, immediately recognized the figure standing before him. He had heard whispers of Khidr, the eternal traveler, the master of divine knowledge, but he had never believed that he would meet him in person. Yet, there he was, Khidr, in all his wisdom and otherworldly presence. Khidr spoke to Idris in a calm, measured voice, one that resonated with the depth of the ages. "You are on the right path, young scholar, but you walk a road fraught with peril. The knowledge you seek is not meant for the hands of those who do not understand its purpose." Idris, eager for wisdom, asked, "But Master, how can we hope to advance if we do not seek new knowledge, if we do not push the boundaries of what is possible?" Khidr's eyes softened, for he understood the young man's desire. He knew that Idris' intentions were pure, but he also knew that humanity's obsession with progress had led it to the brink of self-destruction. "It is not the pursuit of knowledge that is dangerous," Khidr explained, "but the pursuit of it without understanding. Knowledge, when used without wisdom, can tear the world apart. It is a fire that can warm, but also burn." Khidr's Words struck Idris deeply. He had always believed that knowledge was the key to progress, but now he began to see that it was not the accumulation of knowledge that mattered, it was how it was used. With Khidr's guidance, Idris began to understand the deeper layers of existence, the hidden forces that shaped the world, and the balance that needed to be maintained in all things. Together, Khidr and Idris began to study the ancient texts, searching for the wisdom that would prevent the impending catastrophe. They uncovered knowledge that had been lost to time, teachings that had been hidden away for fear of their destructive potential. It was a delicate balance understanding the power of knowledge without succumbing to its temptation. They spent countless hours poring over the texts, discussing their meanings and implications, and slowly, a plan began to form. Meanwhile, the city's rulers grew increasingly concerned as the consequences of their unchecked experimentation began to take hold. The earth trembled, the skies darkened, and strange phenomena began to occur. The fabric of reality itself seemed to be shifting, as if the very laws of nature were being rewritten. The rulers, unable to comprehend what was happening, turned to their greatest scientists and advisors, but none could provide an explanation. They had reached a point where their knowledge had outpaced their understanding. It was then that Khidr and Idris made their move. With the knowledge they had uncovered, they confronted the rulers of the city, explaining the consequences of their actions. But the rulers, blinded by their arrogance, refused to listen. They believed they were on the cusp of unlocking the greatest secrets of the universe, and would not be swayed by the words of a mere scholar and an ancient traveler. Khidr, knowing that the only way to stop the destruction was to reveal the truth, took a bold step. He used his connection to Ilm Laduni to show the rulers the consequences of their actions, not in words, but in visions. Through Khidr's power, the rulers saw the future they had created, a future where their empire had crumbled, the earth had been scarred, and humanity had been driven to the brink of extinction. The visions were vivid, terrifying, and real. The rulers were shown the horrors they had unleashed, the devastation that would follow their actions. And in that moment, the arrogance of their ambition was shattered. The rulers, now fully understanding the consequences of their actions, had no choice but to abandon their experiments and seek a path of healing. Khidr's intervention had saved the world from disaster, but the lesson was not one easily learned. The rulers were forced to accept that true power lay not in the pursuit of knowledge for its own sake, but in understanding its place in the world, in using it for the good of all. The city, though saved, would never be the same. It would take time to rebuild, to restore the balance that had been lost. But with Khidr's wisdom and Idris' guidance, there was hope that humanity would learn to walk the delicate line between progress and preservation. The years passed and the city slowly recovered from the calamities it had narrowly avoided. The rulers, once obsessed with their own power, had learned a valuable lesson through their brush with destruction. They now understood that the pursuit of knowledge, when done without humility, could tear down everything they had worked to build. They worked closely with Idris, under Khidr's guidance, to ensure that the city's future would be one of wisdom, balance, and ethical progress. But Khidr's journey was far from over. He knew that his role in guiding humanity was not confined to a single moment or a single place. He was a traveler of time, and as such he moved forward, always seeking the next challenge, the next moment where his wisdom could help shape the course of history. His connection to Ilm Laduni gave him the ability to transcend time, yet he never allowed himself to be fully detached from the world. The suffering of humanity, the struggles of individuals, and the battles fought in the hearts of men all left their mark on him. Despite his immense wisdom, he was not immune to the pain of the world. One day, Khidr found himself in a distant land, far from the city he had just helped. This was a land torn by war, where the people had forgotten the lessons of peace and had instead embraced violence as a means of resolving conflict. The rulers of this land believed that might was the only way to impose order and control. They ruled with an iron fist, and their armies marched across the land, conquering villages and towns, leaving nothing but devastation in their wake. It was here that Khidr met a young woman named Layla. Layla was not a ruler or a soldier, but a simple healer, known for her compassion and her ability to mend broken bodies and spirits alike. She lived in a village that had been ravaged by the ongoing conflict, and despite the chaos surrounding her, she continued to tend to the wounded and sick, offering a glimmer of hope in a place that seemed to have forgotten what peace meant. Khidr first saw Layla from a distance, her presence standing out in the midst of the destruction. There was something about her, something that drew him to her. Perhaps it was her unwavering determination to help those in need. Or perhaps it was the quiet strength in her eyes that spoke of resilience in the face of unimaginable suffering. Whatever it was, Khidr felt compelled to approach her. When they met, Layla was tending to a young child whose village had been destroyed by the war. The child was terrified, bruised, and broken, yet Layla spoke to her with such warmth and kindness that the child slowly began to calm. It was then that Khidr stepped forward, his timeless form emerging from the shadows. Layla, though startled at first, quickly recognized that this was no ordinary man. There was something ancient and profound in his presence, something that radiated a wisdom that could not be found in any book or scroll. "Who are you?" Layla asked, her voice filled with curiosity and caution. Khidr regarded her with a gentle smile. "I am a traveler, a guide, and a keeper of knowledge. I have seen the world change, and I have watched humanity's struggles unfold across time. But I have never seen a soul like yours, one that holds on to the light even in the darkest of times." Layla, still unsure of this stranger, asked, "What brings you here?" "This land is full of war, death, and despair. There is no place for peace here." Khidr's expression softened, as if he had heard these words countless times before. "That is where you are wrong, Layla. Even in the darkest of times, peace is still possible. It is not something that can be imposed by force or fear, but something that must grow from within. You, like many others, have been touched by the flames of suffering, but it is through the very fire that you can find the strength to rebuild." Layla listened intently, her heart resonating with Khidr's words. She had often wondered if the world would ever know peace again. She had seen the devastation wrought by the wars and the cruelty of those who ruled with violence. But Khidr's words gave her a flicker of hope, a belief that perhaps there was still a way forward, a way to heal the broken pieces of the world. "I do not know how to bring peace to this land," Layla said, her voice tinged with sorrow. "The rulers will not listen, and the people are too consumed by fear to care about anything else." Khidr placed a hand on her shoulder, offering reassurance. "The rulers may be blind to the truth, but the people are not. You have the power to lead them, Layla. It is not through force that you will change the world, but through love, compassion, and understanding. You can be the spark that ignites a fire of change in the hearts of the people. But first, you must believe in the power of peace." With Khidr's guidance, Layla began to understand that the key to peace lay not in opposing the rulers with force, but in winning the hearts of the people. She started by gathering the villagers, the wounded, the poor, and the oppressed, offering them a vision of a future where they could live in harmony, free from the fear that had plagued them for so long. She spoke to them of forgiveness, of healing, and of the strength that came from unity. It was not an easy task. Many of the people were skeptical, and the wounds of the past were deep. But Layla was patient, persistent, and above all, kind. Time, the movement she had started grew. It spread beyond her village and into the surrounding towns. Word of Layla's compassion and her vision for peace reached the ears of the ruling class, who were alarmed by the growing influence she had over the people. They saw her as a threat to their power and decided to take action. But Khidr, who had been silently guiding her, knew that the time had come for a decisive moment. He stepped forward, offering the rulers a choice. They could either continue down the path of violence and destruction, or they could choose to listen to the voice of the people and embrace peace. The rulers, though hesitant, realized that the old ways of control no longer worked. The people were united, and they could not be ignored. Slowly, the rulers began to change their approach. They called for a ceasefire, and negotiations began. It was not an easy process, but with Khidr's guidance and Layla's leadership, peace slowly began to take root. Khidr's time in this land had come to an end. He knew that his work here was complete, and that Layla and the people would carry on the lessons of peace long after he had gone. He left quietly, as he always did, knowing that the world had changed once again. As he walked away, his heart filled with a quiet joy. The path of a traveler is never an easy one, but it is a path filled with purpose, a purpose that transcends time and space. And though Khidr's journey was far from over, he knew that he had made a difference. The end.